Welcome, everybody, to Sports Fluent. I'm Anthony K. Everybody to the Sports Fluent podcast. I'm your host, Anthony K. I'm joined this week with Cameron Campbell. You might know him as Coach Cam. Coach, how you doing, man?
Good, man. How are you?
I'm doing well. I know I'm going to do your favorite part where I tell a little bit about you. So Coach is a former college football player, head coach and athletic director, USA football master trainer, and currently, correct me if I'm mistaken, Houston Texans play safe coach, among about 5 other jobs that you're doing.
I got a little Jamaican in me, so.
Well, it's good. We got to keep working in these times. So I want to start off because when you and I talked, we talked about basketball first. So we're going to get to a lot of football stuff, but I know that you're a basketball fan. You're in Houston. Unfortunately, the Rockets had a tough time with the Lakers, have since let go of their coach, which isn't a big surprise because we expected big things from Houston. And if you don't live up to those title aspirations, that's the first guy to go. They can't fire other players. They get rid of the coach. So tell me a little bit your thoughts about the Rockets and Mike D'Antoni.
Yeah, so Mike D'Antoni is a player's coach, and I enjoy playing for coaches. When I coach, I consider myself somewhat of a player's coach. I think there's a kind of fine line of managing the D'Antoni, Pete Carroll as abstract to like a Nick Saban, but so a really likable guy, a great scheme. I mean, his scheme is really A+. I think the execution of his scheme this year got not say out of hand, but there's so much depth into the 3 and Duncan or the 3 and D scheme that you can kind of pigeonhole yourself, and so I feel like that happened a little bit. But ultimately, I mean, he got guys to play for him, and I think that for him to transition from Chris Paul and then bring Westbrook in and really relatively seamlessly, really speaks to his coaching acumen. And I mean, he's a super successful coach. So as a Rockets guy, I hate that it didn't work here. I feel like if anybody could have made it work, it was certainly him. But the fact of the matter is, you've got a ton of talent on this roster. It's a short roster. They're not tall, they're not long. But whoever comes in, I think, can definitely have some instant success.
Yeah, because it's funny that you said that about him, because I it's obviously entertaining to watch that 3 or dunk kind of fast break, go style. It hasn't really shown to be very successful in the playoffs because I think you got to have a couple of different styles. I think you could play that way to a certain extent, but in the playoffs when things slow down, you still have to have some type of set half-court offense. You can't just, as great as James Harden has been, you can't just say, here, James, like hit a step back 3 every time the play slows down. It works sometimes. But I think that's where D'Antoni, I think, if there's criticism of him, it's that adjustments kind of between quarters at the half that he wasn't able to do. And in the end, obviously, I think cost him the series. We've got a game 7 tomorrow night, Nuggets and the Clippers. Do you have, I don't know if you have a rooting interest here, but do you have if I had to put you on the spot to make a pick?
If I had a quarter to bet, I like the Clippers. I think Kawhi's game is the unsexiest game in the NBA today. And, he's truly like a hybrid of Kobe and Tim Duncan. I mean, the skill set of Kobe with the consistent developmental, low-risk style of play of Tim Duncan. And, to prove your point, I mean, I think that's what's required in the playoffs. And so, I think that there's only so far that emotion can take you as you get deep into the playoffs, very similar to the NCAA tournament where, you get past a couple of rounds, you're in Cinderella, then you just kind of run out of gas. And so I do like the Nuggets. I think they're well put together. I think they're young. It's really nice to see the Joker rebuild his career. Kind of, he got drafted so high that he was almost forced to be a bust, almost like a Manziel. You don't draft a guy that high. He's kind of just due to disappoint. So I like what the Nuggets have done. So yeah, but I think if I had a bet, I'd go with the Clippers.
And they've, to the Nuggets first, they have kind of flown under the radar a little bit, right? Because I don't know if it's just being in Denver and having obviously the 2 LA teams kind of taking and Houston for that matter, and Golden State for so many years, taking all the attention in the West Coast. I think we've forgotten about the Nuggets, and maybe we've forgotten how good Jokic can actually be, and he's kind of showing that this year. Now, for me, obviously, Jamal Murray's a nice Canadian kid, so I'm rooting for him to do well. Not going to lie, I'm kind of hoping Kawhi loses because he left our Raptors. So there's, but I've also, to be honest, I picked the Clippers to make the finals, even against my Lakers. But because look, they're still the best. No, they're the most talented team, right? They're the deepest team. It just doesn't seem to
They are the
fit, though.
deepest.
They
They are the
they
deepest.
don't seem to fit together. So I'm going to be really interested, obviously, to watch Game 7 and see can the Nuggets keep it going? Because you're right, they're kind of going to be that Cinderella team. And then because if they make it past the Clippers, they have a legit shot against the Lakers, right?
I mean, they got a legit shot to show up and not catch COVID on the court. I think so. So I will say this, kind of taking a half a step back to the Rockets. It is amazing. So it's funny, you kind of poured the Kawhi salt as an ex-player, right? So there are so many ex-Rockets. So from Pat Beverly to Montrezl Harrell, I mean, there are like so many guys that you look at because of Morey's style of kind of plug and play, which I think works in the NBA. It doesn't work in the NFL as much, but you can kind of plug and play pieces that they've interchanged. Like maybe a third of like playoff players on the roster have at some point been Rockets. And another point to bring up, kind of going back to the Rockets and the vacancy, the coaching vacancy that's there, it's pretty interesting. So you've got Sam Cassell, who's on that list, who I think could be a very good head coach. Was drafted by the Rockets, won a championship here. The first thing I think that's so impressive about him is his evolution from a player to a coach. A lot of guys don't make that. That's a rough transition to make. So the rigors of the road and kind of having the schedules easy, but the transition from, it's almost like a guy who gets pulled up from JV up to varsity and then has to deal with his contemporaries on JV. So I think he did that very well. But if I had one vote to pick, it's got to be Coach Van Gundy. So Coach Van Gundy and I actually have a really cool relationship. So the Final Four was here in maybe 2012, 2011, kind of in that window. And I went to a charity event, and he was a keynote. And just on a whim, I said, "Hey, Coach, I'm a local head coach here in the Houston area." Again, he was not only the Knicks coach when the Rockets won their championship, but he really was the backbone of those Yao and T-Mac teams. And I said, "You're a hero coach of mine. Could I just take you to lunch and just pick your brain?" And he said, "Yeah, here's my number. Call me tomorrow." And so,
Wow.
yeah. And so
Sometimes you just got to ask, right?
You got to shoot your shot. You got to shoot your shot. And so that was March or April. And so we scheduled a lunch that summer. So maybe like June. And I mean, so we went to his favorite. So he lives in Houston. His kids, his family, are all here. And so I just kind of like dug in and just like X's and O's and just like trying to go as deep as I can without looking like an idiot, right? Because obviously, there's the lack of knowledge is so much deeper on the other side of the table. And so finally he's like, "Look, Cam, like put this stuff up. Like, let's talk about the culture of your team." And I was like, "Coach, we play great defense. We box out, like, all the stuff." And he's like, "Yeah, like, but how good is your JV team?" And I was like, "Well, my JV team's solid. I mean, we're a small charter school, so we don't have a lot of like depth, but I kind of see like my JV is like my D league. I could care less how many games they win, how many guys are going to be like varsity ready, the next year." And he's like, "That's it. Like, that's the key." He's like, high school ball, own the tempo, make the other team play your speed. If you can master your JV, that's your pipeline. He's like, you can, there's no limit to how good you can be. And so we actually had a couple of summers of just kind of grabbing lunch and going back and forth. And then he picked up an assignment with USA Basketball over the summer, so his availability kind of shortened. And so I'm kind of hoping he gets that job. So not only can he be back here in Houston, but we can kind of pick up our lunches again because
Right.
After the championship, hopefully he'll vacation and he'll be back here in town.
Oh, that's I didn't know that. That's awesome. Yeah, that'd be fantastic. I think he's a good candidate. Look, there's a lot of names out there. I think with the Nets job going to Steve Nash, a lot of guys, I think that rightly deservedly so, probably should have been looked at, got skipped over. So this is the next kind of high profile. You've got a talented team. They are, are they a piece or two away, or are they there? Are they championship ready with the right coach? Maybe. Right, when you got Russell Westbrook and James Harden, you can't be that far away. So yeah, maybe they're the one coach, right system away from doing that. So that's a team that's going to be, you want to coach that team. So
yeah. So I think that so the Nets job, in my opinion, is fool's gold, right? So there were a lot of, especially as a coach of color, there were a lot of coaches who felt a way about guys not getting consideration, and like, what does this guy have to get a job? I've got to tell you, I don't trust Kyrie. I mean, I don't know that Kyrie's ever been at the college level a team player. More importantly, I don't know that there's not a place he left that he didn't get a coach fired. And so, I get, if I were to give Kyrie Irving a caricature, it would be Garfield. like I'm lazy.
why? Yeah, tell me why.
Yeah, I'm lazy. I know what it takes to get my owner to give me pizza. Was it pizza?
Lasagna. That was lasagna. Yeah, that's the one thing I do know.
So I know what it takes to get my owner to give me some lasagna, give me the rock, give me the pill. And if I don't feel like playing, I won't. And if it's gotta work, I get on fire. Just, and this is, yeah. I'm not a Kyrie guy, especially as a point guard. Like, yeah, that's not what I'm looking for in a point guard.
So skill-wise, obviously, right, Kyrie's got all the tools. KD is one of the greatest scorers maybe ever, obviously in the league today, maybe ever.
Facts.
But the two of them together, look, I don't know them personally, but I think you see them, like the stuff they do on social media and the things they say, I question I don't want to say, just they seem a little, like KD seems to take things too personal as a professional athlete. Kyrie, same type of deal. Like they seem to get I don't want to say emotional, because I don't think that's a bad word, because emotion's a great thing in sport. But I feel like, if everything's not going their way, you can get inside their heads on or off the court. And that scares me about a championship team, because the one thing we've learned from a guy like Kawhi, right, is if you can stay even keel, good things come to you, right? The run last year by the Raptors, they lost the first two games to the Bucks. And what was his response to it? What are you going to do now? Go back to Toronto, right? Like, it was just serious. It's back to work. And that's what scares me about those two guys. Now, can they put it together because of their talent? Yeah, maybe. But I think you might be onto something there.
Yeah, and I think that, so the Kawhi thing, I mean, I wonder how much of that is him and how much of that's just like pop, just like brain stamping, like a mentality, right? The KD, so KD to me, so again, skill set aside, he is a conundrum. I mean, I think he is what the future of the NBA, what David Stern had in his head for what the future of the NBA was supposed to be. He is that. He's a very easy guy not to like, right? Like off the court. And so I just, there are a few positions. So I've got a few rules. Number one, you as a coach, you've got to have a level of connectivity with your point guard. Number two, I never trust a goofy quarterback. So like Jared Goff, I would never. Like that guy would trip over turf. You know what I mean? Like, not saying that you gotta be like Joe Cool walking down the street.
No,
but there's a level of like composure you have to have. And then, like with Kyrie, it's like, yeah, I'm not practicing for 6 weeks. Why? Just because I just came up with 42 days. I'm not going to do it. Right? So it's like, yeah, that's not, not to be negative. But, and I think the other thing with the Rockets, I think, were half a piece away in a D'Antoni scheme. They're two pieces away in anybody else's scheme. I mean, you have to get longer. And that's, you trade Clint Capella away. He didn't have great dexterity, and it almost makes you miss Yao, right? So one of the most frustrating things about Steve Francis was like the elbow bounce pass to Yao's shin. Yeah. It's like he's not catching that peel right there, right? Yeah. Like, put it here. But Clint Capella had less than that, right? And so I think that in his best case, he was a non-front facing Siakam. in his worst case, he was just a younger version of Tyson Chandler. Well, you got Tyson Chandler on your roster now. So either you find a way to integrate Tyson Chandler and get instantly longer and use Tyson Chandler as a spacer, or you just got to just go pick up some Kyle Korver-esque assassins and just throw the ball out.
So I want to get to football, obviously, but last basketball question, because there's quite a few, not just Houston, quite a few job openings. And a name that comes up that is going to stir some emotion with a lot of people is Becky Hammon. So assistant coach with the Spurs. Obviously, I think she head coached their G League team, first female coach to do that. Do you think we're at that point where we're going to get one of these openings is going to get their first female head coach, whether it's her or somebody else?
I think we're at the place where folks who think that it's not a valid idea are having to have a valid reason for why it's not a valid idea, right? And so, the obvious Belichick didn't play much football argument is there, or whatever, as far as her being a woman, transitioning over to men's sports. But the difference is her resume is ridiculous.
Listen, I've always said this, and it sometimes gets applauded, it sometimes gets booed. I say, I don't care the color of your skin, your gender. Like, hire the best qualified person that now fits your system or does what you want to do, whatever that case may be. But they're going to give you the most success, because that just drives me crazy is when you see, any other factor other than, are they qualified to do the job? Right. And her resumes, to your point, is ridiculous.
It's stacked. And so it's like, so can you scheme? Yes. Can you build a culture? We don't know yet, but you can bring supporting role in to help with that.
Yeah.
And then can you handle the pressure? I mean, she's won at every level she's been at. I mean, so I think the validation for saying no is running out. And so, which organization has the courage to pull the trigger? Because the other side to that is, if she doesn't work, that's a very sensitive firing, right? And so you've almost got to have the patience to say, we're giving you 5 years, hell or high water. Just know that you're writing your ticket. And, I don't know other job openings now. I mean, the job openings now, they aren't terrible jobs. I mean, even the Nets job, I'm joking. I mean, it's a good job. And so, it'd be different if Memphis opened up even Memphis isn't a bad job right now. I mean, I think the NBA is so competitive. I'm having a hard time on top of my head thinking of just a non-competitive, there hasn't been a consistently bad team in the NBA for a very long time. And so, that could work to her detriment, because, I should be able to plug you in and we should be able to get, pretty far in 3 years.
Yeah. But to your point, it's also those additional pieces, assistant coaches, I think more so in football than basketball, but, in basketball as well. I was just talking with Hugh Jackson last week, and we were talking about, and you can appreciate this in football, your offensive coordinators, your defensive coordinators, your position coaches, right? Your QB coach or wide receiver coach, they don't get anywhere near the amount of credit that they deserve. But you have a good OC, a good DC, a good quarterback coach. It's funny how those quarterbacks with a really good QB coach tend to develop a lot better than some of the ones that don't, or have constant change in their coaching. It's quite the coincidence, right? No, it's those guys and girls are so important to the development of those players and the culture.
That's right. And so, we spoke off air about, my mentor coach, the best coach I ever played for, Clancy Barone. I think he's with the Bears now. But when he left from the college game to the pro game, he was the tight ends coach for the Falcons. And so the tight ends coach typically is like your entry-level position coach, right? So he was a tight ends coach for the Falcons, Algie Crumpler. He was a tight end coach for the Chargers, Antonio Gates. And then he was an O-line coach for the Broncos when they won the Super Bowl. And so, yes, though all of those tight ends are like amazing tight ends, but they also did not drop any productivity. And they're also like two-way blocking and catching tight ends. And so to your point, it gets easy to say, well, it's just that guy, or just that, that locker room, that film room. Like, no, position coaches, especially in the NFL, earn their salt. Typically, there's the window of, you climb that ladder, and then either you climb the wrong ladder with the wrong head coach and you got knocked down, or the age thing is either working for you or against you. But, those guys are masterful coaches.
Yeah. So So speaking, we've kind of talked about football a little bit. We've talked about women in sports a little bit. So I want to start with one of your other things that you're doing, which is Flag, which is the Football League All Girls. I think it's a great thing that you're doing. Can you tell us a little bit more about what Flag, how it came about, how you came up with the idea, and kind of where you are now?
Yeah, so selfishly, I have a 10-year-old daughter, and she plays soccer. She swims, does gymnastics, and hip hop. I don't know, like they don't call it dancing more. I do hip hop, man. I don't know what
My
that
my
means.
daughter my daughter is 6 and she starts on Wednesday. So hopefully it works out.
But I'm like, let me see a playlist. That ain't hip
Yeah,
hop. Get
yeah.
out of here.
I hope it's the PG version of all those songs
Right.
that I know, anyways.
Exactly. So a couple of years ago, just had like the kind of the gumption of like football has taught me so many character skills on the field, and girls don't have that opportunity. They are, the conversation, like the Becky Hammond is like starting to begin. But at the time, there was either like really misogynistic, like women's football and lingerie, or there was like this really like strong cultural locker room thing that just wasn't quite, I thought, a great fit for my daughter. And I was just like, I just want to build a really dope place where good athletes can be exposed to a really dope sport. And you can come from soccer, you can come from field hockey, you can come from lacrosse. It doesn't matter what sport you come from. If you have basketball plus any other sport, soccer, you name it, there's a space for you to play football. And so, the concept started off as a league concept, but we actually ended up finding a lot of success just as a live activation. And so planning it 6 weeks, 10 weeks out, and, marketing out to communities, families, and churches and schools, and saying, hey, if you have a girl who's interested in playing football, learning the game of football, just tell them to come out to the park and let's just have some fun. And it's been great.
I love it. I love it. And I think my daughter's a little young yet, but I've got her playing soccer, working on the footwork, and then maybe that football will be the next step because she's sitting watching with me all the time. And I have 6-year-old twins, a boy and a girl, so I want them both playing. I want them both kind of experiencing all those things, and it kind of brings me to the next thing because having those kids, they wake me up early in the morning, and I'm not a morning person. I struggle every morning, but you have win the first quarter of your day. And again, that's something about obviously getting up, getting going, motivating yourself. Tell me more about it because you started this again. How did that come about, and what's that all about?
So when the first quarter of your day is my online course, I'm really excited by it. The idea was birthed while I was on my book promo tour. I wrote Alpha Redefined last fall. And the one question I got at every stop was, how do you do all these things? You've got this in the community, you've got this going. And every time I would say, I just win the first quarter of my day. I get up at 4 o'clock every morning. I have a pretty consistent, protocol that I use to start my day. I spend my time with God. I have my time with my affirmations. I like to get up and get a good lift in, get a good run in, and, kind of go through a recalibration and kind of just like lay out, what it takes to be successful. And what I find is, it's almost like hedging your bets, right? And so, champions are made in the off season. And, that 4 o'clock to 8 o'clock or the first 4 hours of your day is really the off season of your day. It's quiet. The emails aren't chirping. You're able to distance yourself from your devices and just focus on what you need to focus on. And so, so as I began to kind of work through it and, integrate it into my business and different offerings from a consultation standpoint, it was like, wow, this is dope. We're making like meaningful impact with our clients, but there's only one of me. Like I can't like go around and, like sling the gospel of waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning. How do I get this into the masses' hands? And just the idea of like, well, let's create an online course that maps out like, each step. And the way it's laid out is pretty easy. It's sports, related. So each major principle is called a module. And then within each module is called a play. So you've got a play, you've got a drill down, you've got an audible, you've got also, relatable testimony and kind of this experience. And then you've got your indie work, and indie work is short for, individual work. And so at the end of every play, you've got your indie work that you've got to get done to help you, map out the skills that required for you to get to that next step.
Okay, so I'm gonna need that because my day consists of I wake up too late, I'm scrambling to get my kids ready, and then by the time I start into my day, I feel like I'm always behind. The good thing is I'm good with scrambling. You know, I'm like Randall Cunningham, um, and but I always feel like I'm one step behind trying to catch up. And so when I saw your stuff about winning the first quarter, I was like, yeah, that's something I need to incorporate into my day because there's so much going on. Listen, I read kind of all the things you're doing, public speaking, coaching, this, that. It's like I got tired reading your bio, right? And that was the first question, right? How do you get all this stuff done? So that's important. And so the last thing I'm going to talk to you about is we touched on it in the beginning. So Houston Texans, play safe. I know you've worked with some of the guys from the Texans. I'm assuming in the off season. Tell me about that. Tell me about play safe. I think we all know a little bit about play safe, but give us some more about what you're doing specifically with the Texans.
Yeah, so what I do with the Texans is kind of lead the community initiatives as far as, being an advocate of champions of opportunities for youth and family sports, particularly when it comes to football. So we have a handful of activations throughout the year. We have our mom's clinic. We have our play safe activations for our kids. We have a ton of stuff for coaches. I think one of the coolest things about the Texans organization is, they're as close to an open book as you can get from an NFL club as possible. I mean, the resources that they make available to youth coaches, middle school and high school coaches, even college coaches is immense. And one of the other things they do that's super dope is, the NFL has a number of dollars set aside for community programming and initiatives and field redos and updates. But the Texans actually match and sometimes double that. And so they're really committed to making sure that, we're playing on a safe surface. We're playing with great skill and technique. But more importantly, kind of going back to the flag thing, like this sport is for everyone in the family, no matter what, your background is, no matter what your athletic ability is, no matter what your football knowledge is. We want to make sure that you feel welcomed and valued. And so that's what we do with the Texans. And, it's pretty cool watching the evolution of it. We're actually working on a pretty cool project here over the last week or two. Because of COVID, we weren't able to physically get out into the community the way that we typically do in years past. So we're working on something special. I can't let too many secrets out, but working on something special to make sure that we're bringing the resources we have into the community.
Well, when you're allowed to say something about that, definitely let me know so we can share it because it sounds like it's big, so I want to know more about it. I want to thank you for your time. Where can anyone get a hold of you, see half of the stuff that you're doing, and obviously find win the first quarter of your day?
Yeah, so I'm on all social media handles at Coach Cam Cares. And then the online course can be found at coachcamcourses.com.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Coach. I really appreciate your time today.
Thanks, Anthony. I appreciate you.